Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning we'll be in Matthew, chapter 18, verse 1 through 22. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus, saying, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" He called a child, had him stand among them, and said, "I tell you the truth, unless you turn round and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever then humbles himself like this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes a child like this in my name welcomes me. But if anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a huge millstone hung around his neck and be drowned in the open sea. Woe to the world because of stumbling blocks. It is necessary that stumbling blocks come, but woe to the person through whom they come. If your hand or your foot causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life crippled or lame than to have 2 hands or 2 feet and be thrown into eternal fire. And if your eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to enter into life with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and be thrown into fiery hell. See that you do not disdain one of these little ones, for I tell you that their angels in heaven always see the face of my Father in heaven. What do you think? If someone owns 100 sheep and one of them goes astray, will he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go look for the one that went astray? And if he finds it, I tell you the truth, he will rejoice more over it than over the 99 that did not go astray. In the same way, your Father in heaven is not willing that one of these little ones be lost. If your brother sins, go and show him his fault when the 2 of you are alone. If he listens to you, you have regained your brother. But if he does not listen, take 1 or 2 brothers with you, so that at the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses every matter may be established. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. If he refuses to listen to the church, treat him like a Gentile or a tax collector. I tell you the truth, whatever you bind on earth will have been bound in heaven, and whatever you release on earth will have been released in heaven. Again, I tell you the truth, if 2 of you on earth agree about whatever you ask, my Father in heaven will do it for you. For where 2 or 3 are assembled in my name, I am there among them." Then Peter came to him and said, "Lord, how many times must I forgive my brother who sins against me? As many as 7 times?" Jesus said to him, "Not 7 times, I tell you, but 77 times." Yeah. Very interesting passages there about childlike faith being important to enter into the kingdom of heaven. The penalty for causing a little one to sin. The importance of removing stumbling blocks in our lives. The importance of not disdaining little ones. The perseverance, I guess, of God and trying to bring back one that's gone astray. And how to deal with grievances against you. Yeah. See what Guzik says. Among the separatist community at Qumran, those who kept the Dead Sea Scrolls, later discovered in the 20th century, there was a manual of discipline, known as 1QS by scholars. Some people think Matthew 18 is an early church version of a manual of discipline. Yet there is a great difference between Matthew 18 and what the Essenes of Qumran had. Their manual of discipline dealt with many specific rules. Here, Jesus deals with principles and attitudes that should mark his people as they get along with each other. Who then is the greatest? The disciples were often concerned about the question of greatness. They seemed to ask this question thinking that Jesus had already chosen one of them as greatest, or as if they wanted Jesus to decide among them. They doubtless fancied a temporal kingdom of the Messiah in which places would be bestowed. They dreamt of a distribution of honors and offices, a worldly monarchy, like the kingdoms of the earth. Jesus called a little child to him. Jesus might have answered the question, who is the greatest, by pointing to himself. Instead, Jesus drew their attention to his nature by having them look at a child as an example. The fact that the child came when Jesus called says something about Jesus. He was the sort of man that children would come to willingly. It also tells us something about Peter. If Peter really was to be regarded as the first pope in the way popes are regarded by Roman Catholic theology and history, Jesus should have declared that Peter was the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. This was probably a great disappointment to the disciples. They knew that in that day, children were regarded more as property than individuals. It was understood that they were to be seen and not heard. Jesus said we have to take this kind of humble place to enter the kingdom, much less to be the greatest in the kingdom. A child was a person of no importance in Jewish society, subject to the authority of his elders, not taken seriously except as a responsibility, one to be looked after, not to be looked up to. Children are not threatening. We aren't afraid of meeting a 5-year-old in a dark alley. When we have a tough, intimidating presence, we aren't like Jesus. Children are not good at deceiving. They are pretty miserable failures at fooling their parents. When we are good at hiding ourselves and deceiving others, we aren't like Jesus. The child is held up as an ideal, not of innocence, purity, or faith, but of humility and unconcern for social status. Jesus knew that we must be converted to be like little children. It isn't in our nature to take the low place and to humble ourselves. Humbles himself does not refer to arbitrary asceticism or phony false modesty, but the acceptance of an inferior position, as Jesus did. Where the same phrase is used in Philippians 2:8. Children do not try to be humble, but they are so, and the same is the case with really gracious persons. The imitation of humility is sickening. The reality is attractive. Whoever causes one of these little ones who believes in me to sin. Jesus takes it seriously when one of his little ones is led into sin. Little ones does not only mean children, but those who humble themselves as children in the manner Jesus described. It is a wicked thing to sin, and it is a far greater evil to lead others into sin. But leading one of Jesus' little ones into sin is far worse, because you then initiate someone into an instance or a pattern of sin that corrupts whatever innocence they had. It would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depths of the sea. The stone and anyone attached to it was sure to sink and never come up again. This was a big millstone. Most millstones were hand tools for domestic use. Here it is the heavy stone pulled around by a donkey. Woe to the world because of offenses. The first woe was a cry of pity for a world in danger of offenses. The second woe is a warning to the one who brings or introduces evil to others. God hath so ordered it in the wisdom of his providence, that he will not restrain the lusts of all men's hearts, but suffer some to walk in their own ways. Woe to that man by whom the offense comes. We live in a fallen world, and it is inevitable that sin and hurt and offenses come, yet the person who brings the offense is guilty before God and has no excuse. This teaches us that we can let go of the anger and the bitterness for what people have done against us. God promises to deal with those by whom the offenses come. If God promises to deal with those who offend his own, it shows that he defends and protects his own. This teaches us that in Jesus Christ, no other person can wreck our life. If they bring offense in our life, God will deal with them, but not forsake us in time or eternity. If your hand or your foot causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. Some people only keep from sin if it is easy or convenient to do it. Jesus warns us that we must be willing to sacrifice in fighting against sin, that nothing is worse than facing the wrath of a righteous God. It really is better to sacrifice in the battle against sin now than to face the punishment of eternity later. If your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you. There are significant problems in taking these words as literal instruction instead of conveying an attitude. The problem is not only from the obvious physical harm that one might bring upon themselves, but more so in the problem that bodily mutilation does not go far enough in controlling sin. We need to be transformed from the inside out. If I cut off my right hand, I can still sin with my left. If my left eye is gouged out, my right eye can still sin. And if all such members are gone, I can still sin in my heart and mind. God calls us to a far more radical transformation than any sort of bodily mutilation can address. Yeah. And even if all those things were gone, the brain still has the capacity to sin. So, more so, this is talking about removing things from our lives that cause us to sin. Even if they're precious to us. Leaving the 99 and going for the one. Here, Jesus emphasizes the love and care we should have for all in the Christian community. The first temptation is to despise one, because only one. The next is to despise one, because that one is so little. The next, and perhaps the most dangerous, form of the temptation is to despise one, because that one has gone astray. Oh, how we ought to love sinners, since Jesus loved us and died for us while we were yet sinners. We must care for drunkards while they still pass around the cup, swearers even while we hear them swear. We must not wait till we see some better thing in them, but feel an intense interest for them as what they are, straying and lost. If you are sinned against, go confront the guilty party directly. It is essential that we go to the offending brother first, not griping and gossiping to others, especially under the guise of sharing a prayer request or seeking counsel. Instead, speak to the party directly. We can say that Jesus gives us two options when your brother sins against you. You can go to him directly and deal with it, or you can drop the matter under Christian long-suffering and bearing with one another. Other options, holding on to bitterness, retaliation, gossiping to others about the problem, are not allowed. If he hears you, you have gained your brother. You've gained him in two ways. First, the problem has been cleared up. Perhaps you realized that he was right in some ways, and he realized you were right in some ways, but the problem is resolved. Second, you have gained him because you have not wronged your brother by going to others with gossip and half the side of a dispute. Importantly, Jesus did not say that your brother must agree with you or immediately repent before you. At first, it is enough if he hears you. If he will not hear, take with you one or two more. The circle of people in the situation only becomes wider as the offending party refuses to listen. If the stubborn, unrepentant attitude remains, they are to be refused fellowship. Let him be to you like a heathen. It is also true that the one or two more, after hearing both sides of the story, may resolve the issue by assigning responsibility differently than the first offended person had thought. The first one to plead his cause seems right until his neighbor comes and examines him. The goal must be the restoration of relationship more than proving oneself right. If two of you agree on earth, there is real power in agreement and prayer, and in the presence of Jesus. This is exactly what the unrepented ones miss out on. Yeah. Was listening to God in the Docks by C.S. Lewis, and he brought up, I guess, the topic of prayer, and if prayer has any use, essentially. He said it's the most useful in that it's something akin to going to a headmaster in a school and asking special permission for this thing to be performed. It's oh my. It has special power amongst things that we can do because it, and part of it is because it requires that special permission from the headmaster, that is God, for it to be done. So. I am there in the midst of them. This means that Jesus isn't up front, closer to the ministers of the leaders. He is in the midst, there to be close to all. It means that he should be proclaimed and revealed to all. Some people leave a church saying, "They have taken away my Lord, and I don't know where they have laid him." I am there in the midst of them. None but God could say these words, to say them with truth, because God alone is everywhere present. And these words refer to his omnipresence. Let it be observed that Jesus is not among them to spy out their sins or to mark down the imperfections of their worship, but to enlighten, strengthen, comfort, and save them. Yeah, that's an important point here, that Jesus is claiming divinity and being able to be with any gathering of 2 or 3 of his followers. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. It's interesting that Jesus, in his previous conversation with Peter, said essentially the same thing, but here it seems to be more widely promised to the rest of the Christian community. Anywho, Psalm 22, verses 19 through 31. But you, Lord, do not remain far away. You are my source of strength. Hurry and help me. Deliver me from the sword. Save my life from the claws of the wild dogs. Rescue me from the mouth of the lion and from the horns of the wild oxen. You have answered me. I will declare your name to my countrymen. In the middle of the assembly I will praise you. You loyal followers of the Lord, praise him. All you descendants of Jacob, honor him. All you descendants of Israel, stand in awe of him. For he did not despise or detest the suffering of the oppressed. He did not ignore him. When he cried out to him, he responded. You are the reason I offer praise in the great assembly. I will fulfill my promises before the Lord's loyal followers. Let the oppressed eat and be filled. Let those who seek his help praise the Lord. May you live forever. Let all the people of the earth acknowledge the Lord and turn to him. Let all the nations worship you. For the Lord is king and rules over the nations. All of the thriving people of the earth will join the celebration and worship. All those who are descending into the grave will bow before him, including those who cannot preserve their lives. A whole generation will serve him. They will tell the next generation about the sovereign Lord. They will come and tell about his saving deeds. They will tell a future generation what he has accomplished. I like Psalm 22:24. For he did not despise or detest the suffering of the oppressed. He did not ignore him. When he cried out to him, he responded. Just reminds me of when Jesus died, let out a loud cry, and the time when it had previously, the sun had stopped shining and the sun shone again, and the veil of the temple was torn, and the centurion said, surely this man was the Son of God, type thing. So when Jesus cried out, God answered. And finally here, Proverbs chapter 5, verses 15 through 21. Drink water from your own cistern, and running water from your own well. Should your springs be dispersed outside, your streams of water in the wide plazas? Let them be for yourself alone, and not for strangers with you. May your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in your young wife. A loving doe, a graceful deer, may her breasts satisfy you all at all times. May you be captivated by her love always. But why should you be captivated, my son, by an adulteress, and embrace the bosom of a different woman? For the ways of a person are in front of the Lord's eyes, and the Lord weighs all that person's paths. So far from, the Augustinian view that sex is evil, and only allowed for the purpose of procreation. The Bible presents a different view of it as something to be rejoiced in, but rejoiced in the right circumstances, that is, between the marital relationship of a husband and wife. I was reading through St. John Chrysostom's on the family life, which has several of his homilies on the marital relationship, and he highlights the importance of marriage as a means of sanctifying the husband and wife. That is, to keep them from immorality. The point is made that God has provided a place for man to satisfy his sexual needs. In the marriage with the wife of his youth, it that is, in the marriage with the wife of his youth. It is easy to feel that real sexual satisfaction must be found outside the marriage, but this is an illusion and a deception. It is highly important to see sexual delight in marriage as God-given, and history confirms that when marriage is viewed chiefly as a business arrangement, not only is God's bounty misunderstood, but human passion seeks other outlets. And always be enraptured with her love. The phrasing of this implies there is an element of choice involved. We usually think that being enraptured with her love is something that can happen to a person from the mystical force of love. Yet, we love what we choose to put our affections on, and a husband can choose to be enraptured with love towards his wife, even if he fears love has diminished or died. The emphasis is on the singular, on one woman for one man. Though Solomon strayed far from this ideal, at least at one time in his life he recognized the value of it. Anywho, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day. Bye.